You can scan it.
Ready?
Okay.
Okay. Hi everyone and welcome to Xinhua Live. We are here at Summer Davos 2019 in the northeastern Chinese coastal city of Dalian. Now, yesterday some of our viewers may have joined us for our live stream on new technologies that are raising some ethical questions surrounding facial recognition and technological advancements in the medical care sector. And today we're going to stick to the theme of technological advancements, but this time we're going to talk about a technology that we've been hearing more and more about lately, and that is autonomous air taxis. So joining me today is Mr. Florian Reuter he's the CEO of German aircraft manufacturer VOLOCOPTER. Now, Mr. Reuter, could you firstly talk about what VOLOCOPTER has achieved so far and aims to achieve in the future?
Happy to do so, Katie. So, VOLOCOPTER is a company headquartered in Germany. We've been around since 2011. We're building the VOLOCOPTER. It's a completely novel type of air vehicle in that it's pretty much like a supersized drone. However, it needs to meet the most stringent certification and safety requirements. That means that novel in the sense that we bring completely new features to aircraft. It's extremely safe, very quiet, all electric, that means emission-free, and very economic in the operation. And with that, we expect that we can broadly, make urban air mobility accessible to larger audiences and, dramatically expand the market as we know it today.
Great. It's rather revolutionary. It's amazing. And so you recently conducted a test flight in Dubai, I believe. And what type of an impact did that have on the company? And have you done any of the test flights since? And if not, do you plan to?
Absolutely. So we were selected by the authorities in Dubai, namely the Road and Transport Authority, to conduct the first ever autonomous flight of an air taxi. So they wanted us to really have no human interference in that particular flight. So we took on that challenge with our engineering team based in Germany. We did a lot of, temperature testing of components and the system before moving into the city center of Dubai and actually conducting that flight in, the presence of the Crown Prince and in front of live media, which was really a big stunt for us.
Yeah, and that's a big deal.
I think it did put, air taxis as a concept and us as a company really in the spotlight of world media at the time. And we've evolved since then. So, bringing a completely new transportation mode to cities all over the world is a pretty big feat to get to. And that ambition really seemed overwhelming in the beginning. However, nowadays, we have reached so many milestones of, certification in Germany, a number of generations of vehicles that have been certified that we've been flying. So, we keep learning. We have added very potent shareholders to our ranks. So we are supported by Daimler, for example, the maker of Mercedes, or Intel as well. And Daimler, for one reason, because we want to manufacture and operate these vehicles really at scale that is unprecedented in the aviation sector. So that's why we reached out to the car makers to say, hey, didn't you have an interest to manufacture these vehicles, in the volumes that you're used to? And this is the paradigm shift that we want to get to. So coming back to your question about did we have other public stunts? Yes. So with our shareholder Intel, we were invited to be part of the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. And in 2018, I had the pleasure of being on stage with the CEO of Intel. We were flying live on stage inside the casino in front of 5,000 people, press worldwide attending, which kind of shows you the level of comfort that we have gotten to in the precision and the reliability of our vehicle.
Wow, so that's a lot of milestones in just a short time of establishing the company.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And how do you see the market potential of autonomous air taxis in both the short-term and the long-term future? And what are the application scenarios, such as within a city or between cities?
Yeah, so it's funny because we rarely get asked about the market potential because everybody just kind of naturally relates to the fact that, yes, this would actually relieve a big problem we have in every city, which is congestion. But of course, once you get to dig deeper, you want to have precise numbers. So there's more and more market studies coming out by very renowned consulting agencies or companies or say banks. Morgan Stanley just issued a report on that that speak of very large numbers. Now we can pick any one, and it's a large enough number to justify, being active in this space. But just to bring out one, maybe there's an Oliver Wyman study that says that in 2030, the passenger market is going to be around $30 billion on the operator and vehicle manufacturer side. However, that's going to be distinguishing between different missions, as you asked for application scenarios. So there's one mission which is really the inner urban city mission, which is what VOLOCOPTER is absolutely focused on, right? Short range, very quiet is an absolute prerequisite for that. That's where the VOLOCOPTER is optimized for. There's also potential beyond that, for example, for city-to-city connections, but those require different vehicle concepts that VOLOCOPTER is not pursuing at this time. So we are really focusing on the larger portion of the market, which is the lion's share, that we have designed our vehicle for. Now, what's interesting is that in the city of the future, you will not only be transporting passengers in the air, but actually it doesn't matter whether you have a number of passengers or whether you're carrying something very heavy over a populated area. So a small drone delivery, might not be so dangerous to be flying in a city, but if we're flying a gigantic VOLOCOPTER drone, you really want this one to be as safe as the man-carrying drone. So we see a huge potential to also build a variant of our product, which will carry cargo instead of passenger. So that's another application scenario, again for logistical, maybe even outside the city, agricultural or industrial applications. So there's a whole let's say, handful of various applications. Yeah. You asked from a perspective over time, we expect initially we'll see traditional helicopter services being replaced by these novel and superior vehicles. I would expect that, for example, touristic, flights over Dalian would be a perfect, showcase.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
It would be really great for the tourists. It's, emission-free and comparably economic compared to helicopters today. So, why not establish this as a tourist case, for example, initially? So I expect that sequentially we'll get to those large market volumes and potentials that we see in the studies, but that will take its time because we need to evolve the ecosystem as we grow. So we're pretty straightforward in starting with more or less the regulatory environment that the helicopters are using. We'll have a certified pilot, limited operation, but once we want to scale, we actually want to take out the pilot, we want to start flying fully autonomous, and then we need the prerequisites in terms of ubiquitous landing sites and next generation air traffic management. So there's a number of items that we need to install in order to get to full scale and fully exploit the potential that this technology brings to cities across the world.
Great. I don't think people realise how much research has already been done in this area, so it could actually be sooner than maybe we think.
Absolutely, and it's really out of research state now, right? We are, we've done this flight or the trial in Dubai, and we just announced another trial in Singapore later this year.
Wow, that's
where we
great city to do it.
And that's why we selected Singapore, because we believe it can serve as a blueprint for many other cities to follow. The Singaporean authorities have been extremely supportive, and we're very thrilled to go there now and show all the pieces of urban air mobility come together in a showcase at a very central place in the city. We will see a piloted flight of a VOLOCOPTER, and we will also for the very first time reveal our prototype for a VOLOPort, which is the takeoff and landing site that we want specifically built for our type of services.
Wow, that's going to be an amazing scene over there, Marina Bay Sands area, isn't it?
Potentially there.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're more than invited to come along and visit.
Great, yeah, Xinhua should definitely come over to cover that.
Yeah.
And what made you choose to focus on autonomous driving in the air instead of on the ground, as a lot of other companies are doing at the moment?
Yeah.
So the air?
We do witness this huge push towards making driving or ground transport autonomous, which I think makes sense. However, we don't believe that will ultimately relieve the congestion issue we have, because those autonomous cars will be more efficient, more efficiently using the infrastructure that we have. But those cars will probably, and as is predicted in other studies, drive many more miles than the cars that we have today. So less cars, but driving more miles. Depending on the ratio, it might end up in even more congestion than what we have today. So I think more and more regulators and city policymakers are realizing that, and they are actively searching for alternative solutions. And I think urban air mobility is not going to resolve the entire issue, but it can certainly be a piece of the puzzle towards a good solution. I tend to say I don't want to be offering a service for the top 5% of citizens. I want the service to be attributed to the top 5% of most congested routes in a city,
Absolutely.
where it makes sense for everyone
Yeah.
to jump from a ground base to a urban transportation mode. That's where we want to get to.
Yeah, it's amazing. And since your company focuses on pure electric multicopters, how do they stay in the air for a longer time? And how often do they need to be charged?
Yeah. So, flying all electric is pretty new, right? We know it from the smaller toy drones, but scaling this up to an actual payload, passenger carrying air vehicle is quite a challenge. So the battery technology today clearly is the performance limiting element that we have. So our vehicle will instantly benefit from better battery technology. Now, I don't expect there to be any miracles very soon, but we are, of course, very actively screening the landscape with our partners, including Daimler and Intel again and others, to make sure that we always put the most advanced battery technology into the volocopter. So whatever advances we see in the marketplace, we will incorporate them, and thereby expanding range and expanding performance. So we expect there to be improvements, but the good news is we have a perfectly viable product from the start. And the time is now. There's no reason to wait for that. So the only thing holding us up right now is really the completion of the commercial certification for our vehicle, which we are going through a very rigid process with the European Aviation Safety Agency. And that process is expected to be completed within the next 24 months.
Yeah, so people are already working this out like ahead of time, I guess.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
in a lot of detail. Yeah.
In a lot of detail, exactly. So from research in this field, how would the traffic of air taxis be managed? I mean, on the ground we have traffic lights and other signals, so what would it be like in the air, would you imagine?
So, whatever we do, we need to integrate it into the existing air traffic management. So, with, I think, limited operations initially, we are fine to use the conventional air traffic management and logistics. However, once we want to scale, we need an additional technology layer, let's say managing the airspace and making sure that the vehicles are on different trajectories. So we call it deconflicting. That needs to be ensured. And there is technology trials happening all over the world actually to enable that. And we're absolutely sure that technology is in place. It just needs to be a standard that's being picked by the air traffic manager, depending on the nationality. And we just need to make sure that we integrate with whatever system is being made a standard in the respective country. And we are making sure we have that by partnering with these UTM, it's called, Universal Traffic Management Providers. And as we are the first air vehicle really around, everybody is very keen on partnering with us, which is great for us because that way we make sure that whenever it's mature enough, we can integrate into our vehicle, and that is that tick in the box for the ecosystem is made. So we're good to start with what we have, but once we grow, we need the technology to evolve alongside.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you would take inspiration from how passenger aircrafts are already being managed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because in some airspace we will be interacting, right? So
Yeah.
I would love to fly close to the airport, as close as possible.
Yeah.
So, we need to interact, and that interface needs to be standardized, of course. But maybe one more comment on that end. Autonomous flying might even be simpler than autonomous driving because our ecosystem is simpler, right? We have much more space because we have the third dimension, so it's much easier to avoid any collision, right? We can have an intersection where we can go full speed because we don't have a traffic light or something.
Right.
And on top of that, we have much less participants, and those participants in the airspace usually are very well educated and have a high degree of technology equipment on board. So it's much simpler to change the system holistically for everyone to go autonomous, or to at least interact appropriately. Much simpler than on the ground, where you have not only animals but walking persons and so on. So that's, I think, a good feat for us, where we can be implementing autonomous flying even earlier than autonomous driving.
Wow, that's really fascinating stuff. So for those just joining us, we are sat here with Florian Reuter from VOLOCOPTER to talk about a future with air taxis. So please join the discussion with your comments below. Now yesterday there was a forum on green leadership and sustainability here at Summer Davos. And you obviously, we've been talking a lot about congestion, and even on your website you mentioned about the company's aim to relieve congested cities. So could you talk a little bit more about how VOLOCOPTER puts the ideas of environmentally friendliness and green development into its strategies?
Yeah. So, we want to be part of the solution. So there's no sense in offering something that's luxurious and continuing to pollute the environment as our helicopter operators today. So from the start, we wanted something that has the potential to be fully sustainable. That's why we very deliberately decided we want to be all electric from the start, fully accepting that there are some limitations to the performance today. At the same time, we want green, renewable energy to be, charged into our batteries. So that's a company mantra. I think what we have yet to improve on is really the life cycle of the batteries overall, right? You can do second use, maybe third use, but then the question is how do we really fully recycle the battery? I think that's a challenge that the entire mobility sector still has to solve. It's the same in our VOLOCOPTER as it is in an electric vehicle. And there's a lot of research going on in that area. And I'm hopeful we can solve that in a manner that really gets us as a mobility sector overall into a 100% sustainable state further down the line. Again, with that mode, once we become full sustainable, it doesn't really matter how energy efficient you are anymore per kilometer, as long as that kilowatt hour was produced in a renewable manner. And that's what we can bring. So rather than standing there unproductive in a traffic jam, yes, you need a little bit more energy, but at least you get to your destination quicker and you stay productive. And I think that's really a benefit that the entire society can benefit from.
It's amazing. There's so many big companies these days are always putting sustainability and green development at the heart of things, which is
it's a challenge, but we definitely strive for that as good as we can. Absolutely.
Good to hear in a world of changing climate.
Climate crisis, and I can only support that standpoint. Yeah.
Exactly. And in the future, if you enter the stage of mass production, how will you maintain a balance between, making profits and keeping enough air taxis in operation whilst also guaranteeing the safety of passengers?
So that's a constant, balance, I guess. We are mandated by the regulators to be operating at the same safety levels as commercial airliners, which is huge. It's much safer to fly in a plane than ride on a car or other modes of transport. So we will have to adhere to these same standards. So safety isn't really a trade-off we can take, and we don't intend to take. Safety comes always first. In terms of mass production, that's why we chose Daimler, so we can really scale up, to an industrial volume, thereby driving down cost and really reaching out to larger audiences that can afford our services, which is our aim. Ultimately, we want to provide urban air mobility in every city, and ideally covering a large part of the city. As I said, the most severe routes in every city, and so therefore we're very much looking forward to that. And I think that safety comes first, and the manufacturing, we're very optimistic that can all be brought into a good balance of a healthy, long-term, also profitable business.
Great. And do you have plans to venture into the Chinese market, and how do you view the prospects of China's economy in terms of its determination to continue opening up and its economic potential?
So China has a huge potential. I think Asia actually stands out as the region with the largest potential for this type of technology.
It's got the biggest population as well.
It's got the biggest population. It's got huge population centers, right? Urbanization trend going on. Very dense settlement structures. It's different in other parts of the world. So I think there's a number of reasons on why we are in Asia so early. So naturally, the Chinese market is of huge interest to us.
Absolutely.
At the same time, we do accept that there are some government hurdles. It's the climate for that is improving, but there are still some hurdles that need to be respected, and we will. And of course, China is a huge market, and it's a market that is different from Europe, and I think we have to accept that fact. And the conclusion we choose is that obviously we want to reach out a hand to the right Chinese partners to do this jointly. So we don't expect to do the whole urban air mobility ecosystem implementation in China all alone. I think that would too great a hurdle for us. So we are very actively reaching out a hand for Chinese companies that have competence in that space to actually come up, partner with us, and make urban air mobility a reality.
Indeed, yeah. There's lots of Chinese people that are keen on developing new technology. I think we see that a lot, even just at Davos and many other events.
Absolutely. We even see studies that show that the expected adoption rate of this new type of technology, including urban air mobility, is indeed highest in Asia. and lowest in, I believe it was the US, but we looked at those charts. It's interesting too. So we think there's huge potential here.
Indeed.
And once we get the EASA certificate in Europe, it's a well-respected certification agency that other geographies will accept. And then we want to start implementing together with our partners to make urban air mobility a reality for ideally all of us.
That would be amazing. And then just lastly, if you could just briefly comment on Premier Lee this morning. He addressed the forum with a speech. And what do you think was the key message he was sending to participants like you?
So my understanding is that the Chinese government also wants to continue to attract international technology companies also to be active in China. So I think it needs to be a reciprocal exchange, right? Some come to China, others of course go overseas. And as we have such a big interest in the Chinese market, we of course want to partner with companies, ideally on eye level, and having more, let's say, ability to implement these partnerships on truly eye level, I think is a very good sign, especially in these times of geopolitical turmoil that we see. So I'm very hopeful that we will get to very fruitful partnerships with Chinese companies going forward, and I thought this was a good sign in the right direction.
Great. Mr. Reuter, thank you so much for joining us today for this fascinating discussion about the future of transport. For all our viewers watching today, please comment below with your thoughts about this new technology, and please stay tuned for more live streaming during Summer Davos 2019. See you next time.